son of a bitch. He actually did it. So it's finally here, the Backrooms' feature debut upon the silver screen. And for those of you that aren't in the know, which seems to be the biggest talking point surrounding this movie, it's directed by a 20-year-old Kane Parsons, who is one of the youngest filmmakers to ever direct a studio-made movie, and he is the youngest director of any A24 project. And joining him on this directorial venture is a stacked cast and crew consisting of Hollywood's finest, with the likes of Chiwetel Ejiofor, Renate Reinsve, and Mark Duplass in front of the camera. I probably mispronounced a lot of those names. Meanwhile, Sean Levy, Osgood Perkins, and James Wan are behind the camera, among many other familiar names and faces. And to keep things relatively cryptic for now, the movie follows Clark, an alcoholic and recent divorcee with a more than troubling past, as he works to keep his struggling furniture outlet afloat. Alongside him is his therapist, Mary, who, despite also haunted by her own traumatic past, attempts to help Clark find solace in his. But then, one day, Clark finds something in the basement of his furniture store, and, well, this very thing leads him to discover the titular Backrooms. And from there, bad things happen. Very, very bad things happen.
Hello?
Now, to get my thoughts and feelings out up front, to be honest with you, I wasn't too hot on this movie. But that being said, I do feel like it absolutely deserves a rewatch to really get the full scope and context of what's going on here. Because actually, you know what? I'm gonna go rewatch the movie right now. Alright, so I'm back from the rewatch, and, you know, surprisingly, my thoughts have actually changed a bit. Anyway, alright, so now that I've seen it twice now, let's get into my actual review. And I want to say it now before I get into the nitty-gritty of things. I did like this movie, especially more on the rewatch. And I guess a fine point to start on is with Kane's inception of his take on the Backrooms here on YouTube. Now, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a diehard fan of his web series or anything like that. I have seen a couple of his videos, but I'm not very well versed in the lore, basically at all. I enjoy the aesthetics, and I really love the atmosphere Kane built with the few videos that I have seen, but I don't know, the whole company side of things where there's guys in suits exploring this place, and I don't know, it felt more like Stephen King and Stranger Things than I would have liked. Now, don't get me wrong, I love both of those things. I love Stranger Things, except for that last season, of course. My God, what happened to this show? And I love Stephen King. It's just that these elements aren't really why I like the Backrooms. And having said that, there's actually like a not too bad missed reference in the Backrooms movie.
I've been there every night since I found the place, and I still barely scratched the surface. All right, just take it slow.
Pull me up! What do you see?
Oh, now that I think about it, there's also a scene just like this in Stranger Things, too. But that aspect of the Backrooms, I guess the story and the lore of it all, did very little for me. I cared a lot more about the dread and the uncanny, the unease, the more visceral and primal elements, which is a big reason why I love his video about a dude getting chased around a mall by a giant wooden parade float. It's more of an experience than it is a broader, overarching story to follow, you know what I mean? But again, besides that, I don't know too much about his stuff on YouTube. Fast forward to the movie, and a lot of those same thoughts and feelings carry over, and both times after leaving the theater, I couldn't help but shake this feeling of like, I feel like this world, these back rooms, are better suited for YouTube than it is for a movie. At least the movie that we got, this version of it. And just to be clear, I did not go into this movie trying to compare it to like its YouTube counterpart, even though it kind of sounds like I did. I swear I didn't. I go into any and every adaptation of literally anything the same way. Watch it and experience it on its own merits. Critique and engage with it on its own merits. Whether it's a book or a show or a comic or a video game or whatever, an adaptation of anything, right? But with the Backrooms movie, I kind of struggled with it. Because at least with the YouTube videos, as I remember them anyway, are largely long found footage sequences that absolutely ooze atmosphere and tension with the loosest sense of story and character behind them. They're more mood pieces, right? Focused on the primal over the cerebral. Seems very intentionally so, and sequences just like that are present here in the movie, wonderfully so. It's most of everything else around those sequences that don't entirely work for me. For example, the first chunk of the movie is front-loaded with exposition, and I think a lot of my issues stem from the script because this is a movie, right? And not a YouTube video. I think that YouTube audiences tend to love exposition and world building and having loads of information to chew on and like to get lost in the details. But in movies, front loading it like that with so much exposition isn't usually a great thing. And this version of the Backrooms, the movie, is very clearly trying to have real characters and a real story you can engage with and connect with, while also seemingly catering to that original internet fandom, and I'm not sure that the balance was fully there. And no, this is not about the pacing. I know a lot of people online are saying that the movie's boring and that it's too slow, that they wanted the mold monster. It's like, dude, no, that doesn't bother me at all. I didn't think this movie was boring whatsoever. I liked this movie. Well, that all being said, heavy spoilers from here on out, because it's really hard to talk about this movie and explore my feelings with it without doing so. So if you haven't seen it and are interested in it, go watch it, especially because a lot of what I'm about to say is going to make very little, if any, sense if you haven't seen it. I mean, either way, I would definitely recommend this movie with the caveat that it's not going to be for everybody, in the same way that like a David Lynch movie isn't going to be for everybody, or that like In a Violent Nature wasn't for everybody. This certainly is not as accessible or as quote-unquote fun as something like Obsession. So if you're going into it with that mindset, it's not that.
No, don't do it!
Right, so with that out of the way, what this movie's actually about, the themes and the motifs at play here, that of existentialism and memory, trauma, psychosis, and feeling like you're stuck in life and that maybe you're not where you're supposed to be because you just can't move past certain things. It's actually really interesting. It's, on a conceptual level, I'd even say that I loved it. It's playing in this like Lynchian House of Leaves, or like a more contemporary comparison would be like maybe I Saw the TV Glow. They're playing in that sort of sandbox. And it's doing so pretty damn well, in my opinion, when it is there. What makes it all the more frustrating, though, is that the movie waits until the third act to really engage with the meat of all of that. Because I never fully cared about the characters or the broader story surrounding those elements until then. And I also understand that it's because the characters are experiencing the same thing. They don't face themselves, or they don't complete their arcs until the third act. I get it. I understand movie structure. I just didn't think the balance was there. And I wouldn't even say that the movie was juggling too much or anything like that. I mean, the main players here are Clark, Mary, and this idea of consciousness and mental imprisonment by way of undealt with trauma. And then there's Async. But Async doesn't really matter, so it really comes down to these three things, which is great. But then so much of the runtime is given over to like that YouTube stuff that I'm talking about. The analog horror, the found footage sequences, being chased around without a clear objective or storyline, it's just survival. And, I get that that's probably what most people are even buying a ticket for to begin with. When they're going to go see this movie, they want the mold monster. They want dudes in suits. They want Async. Hell, I mean, there were people in my theater actually dressed up as those dudes. They were just walking around in suits. So I get it. The fandom, I understand. But because so much runtime goes to that stuff, the more cerebral thematic elements struggle for it. Like Clark in his very first scene is immediately established as a deeply troubled, controlling, hypocritical and frankly loathsome person, which is probably why his wife divorced him. And then you have Mary, his therapist, who is still carrying the weight of her childhood that is like defined by her schizophrenic mother who never let her outside. And because of that childhood, she became a therapist and talks about this idea of a window within ourselves. The same window that she was always trying to look through as a child, but never could. And windows probably become the biggest motif in the entire movie, both literally and metaphorically. It's all centered around this idea of a mental prison and how there's always a window to look out of from it, how there's always a latch and that it's never truly broken, that we can look toward a more ideal version of ourselves and we don't only have to be spectators in our lives. We can step through this window. And in Clark's case, you know, he has a different idea. And the movie lays this all out pretty explicitly. I mean, there's a line essentially along the lines of like, you know, the untrained mind accumulates loops and habits, creating the same problems and reaching the same solutions. I mean, Mary's doing this because her childhood constantly haunts her. We constantly see it in flashbacks. I mean, she's literally carrying a piece of her past around with her in the form of a slab of concrete with a handprint in it. Whether that's hers or her mom's, I don't know. Which, I mean, on that same subject, I'm not in love with how that all resolves. You know, her beating Pirate Clark with a slab of concrete with her childhood. It's a little too on the nose for me. It was kind of reminiscent of like Bob beating up the Void, or was it the other way around in Thunderbolts? You know, there's just not a whole lot of room for subtlety there. Although where I think a lot of the subtleties do lie is in Renate's performance. I mean, Mary's face, especially in that final act, her whole arc plays out just on her face. Like her expressions and her acting abilities, it's unbelievable. You just have to pay attention to it, obviously, but
I can't save anyone.
And Clark's clearly doing the same thing that Mary is. He's stuck in these loops and stuck in these habits that he created when he was younger or earlier in his life, and it's, you know, perpetuating the state that he's in now. He still blames anything and everything except for himself. He cannot accept that he is responsible for his life. I mean, he's so petty to the point that, like, when another neighboring furniture store has their own commercial on the screen, he curses at it. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that whenever we see the outside world in this movie, it's so idyllic and beautiful. It's so expansive and shot with these wide angles, and it's so lush with color. Whereas every interior, whether it's Clark's store or Mary's office or the Backrooms themselves, it's like largely colorless and sterile and very claustrophobic. The visual language is very deliberately illustrating how much better things could be and how things actually are when we're able to look past ourselves. I mean, just look at this shot. I mean, I don't know if it could be more clear than this. Look how drab and sad the inside of this house is versus the outside, the iridescent glow on the ground, how lush life is on the other side. And I think it'd be one thing if the movie kept laying out these puzzle pieces and like allowed the audiences to put them together ourselves and come to our own conclusions about these characters and what the Backrooms even is, a la David Lynch, or again, something as recent as I Saw the TV Glow, but it doesn't. It very clearly lays out exactly who Clark is in the final act, why he is the way he is, why he can't take no for an answer. He can never admit that he's wrong. He must be in control about everything. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that when he finally musters up an apology for his wife Barbara, it's when Mary is wearing her scalp and bound to a chair in front of him. Though we gotta give Clark some credit when he finally gives his first and only legitimate, sincere apology in the entire movie, his evil self enters the room and just kills him. The personification of all his shame and guilt and just loser mentality enters the room and just kills him. And I think that that's a pretty fitting end to his arc. Same with the Backrooms themselves. I mean, the movie tells you that the Backrooms is a place that remembers things, or rather a place that misremembers things. And that's clearly supported by the final few images of the movie and that sequence where we go lower and lower into Mary's childhood home, as well as all but confirming that the redhead in the corner is Clark's ex-wife. It's a place that manifests people's memories of certain things. The most cryptic the movie ever got with its ideas was with how like async and their MRI machines are related to the people's memories and trauma manifesting in the Backrooms, and how whether or not, you know, maybe the Backrooms wasn't even a real place, or is this like some sort of Lovecraftian manifestation of human consciousness and memory. Like, all that's cool, but to me it almost felt like the movie wasn't able to, or perhaps didn't want to, commit to one thing or another. I mean, did it want to be a cerebral exploration of human consciousness, one where you're given puzzle pieces and asked to assemble them and interpret them on your own, or did it want to be like this more vibes-based creepy analog horror? It seems like it wants to be both because it assembles much of the puzzle for you at the end, so it's definitely trying to be somewhat accessible, which is kind of ironic because a lot of the general audiences are not fucking with this movie. If anything, a lot of people are saying it's like substanceless and doesn't make any sense and has no story, and that the second half sucks, and it's like, the second half has all the story, dude. I think media literacy is down bad right now. But it also doesn't give you enough scares to warrant, I guess, pleasing general audiences, because there's a lot of people bitching and moaning online about this movie, how it's boring and that, I don't know, they didn't get their levels or something. I don't know what people like about the Backrooms. I'm not into this stuff. Something about almond milk, I don't know, dude. Either way, for me, I just don't think it stuck that landing. Again, it's about the balance. I mean, if I could give an example as to like what I maybe would have changed, again, it's not my movie, it's not my idea, but if there's one thing I would have changed to maybe fix the balance of things a little bit, there's a scene that comes to mind. So Clark, it's like a meme going around at this point now, he goes into the Backrooms and he like steals a stool. And I thought that him stealing this stool, because he's being chased by like a monster during this scene, and he still goes out of his way to steal a chair while being chased. And I thought that this stool was going to like tie into his arc of not being able to change and not being able to let go of the past. Like I thought that maybe it was like a stool from a memory of his and his wife, or you know, maybe he broke it at the night of their divorce, the night that they fought, you know, because we get flashbacks of Mary. So I was like, oh, we're gonna get a flashback of the night that he fought his wife or argued with her or whatever, because clearly everything in the Backrooms is a memory of somebody's, right? So the stool has some significance to somebody. So I thought him stealing it was like, oh, I recognize this stool, this is important to me. But then no, he kind of just, it feels very random and it doesn't really mean anything. And I don't know, it's stuff like that I feel like you could just tie that into what you're doing later on in the movie. Make it more cohesive, I guess. I feel like that was a missed opportunity, which doesn't help that like Clark's change to being like a murderous psychopath kind of comes out of nowhere. Like I know he's always kind of like mentally ill and not a great guy, but him just straight up like murdering people and going crazy kind of comes out of nowhere. It bothers me that all of that change in his character happens off screen. Kind of would have liked to see that too, but I digress. That all said, a lot of my qualms with the movie, I don't necessarily think are like objectively bad things. I mean, if anything, I'm actually just saying that I wanted more of the movie. I'm actually just saying that I liked it and that what's there is super cool. And if nothing else, this movie is a very, very bold swing, made only more admirable by the fact that it's someone's first movie. And then those two facts are even crazier when you consider that Kane Parsons is only 20 years old. I can't overstate enough that even despite me not absolutely loving it, The Backrooms is an extremely mature and bold first swing at making a film. And I think that's the main takeaway with this movie that people should be leaving the theater with. Kane has, at least to me, shown that he's already mastered tone and visual language. And I think his storytelling abilities could be honed in a little bit more, but he's still so young and he's still only starting out. I can only imagine what he's going to be making in, you know, the years to come. I'll say this, I will be there just like I was this time, opening weekend with popcorn and soda in hand, ready for a good time.